Name of the LSA ad. Oh, never mind. We're live. Hey, everybody. How are you doing? Welcome to the Local SEO Firehose. This is episode number 2, and we are here to talk about the wonderful world of local service ads. And just really quickly, before we get started, why don't you all in the audience, why don't you tell us where you're all coming from and where you're hailing from? I'm here out of Phoenix, Arizona, where it's about 60 degrees. So with that, why don't we just get started and have our panelists introduce themselves to you? And we'll start with you, Tom.
Hi, my name's Tom Waddington. I've been doing local search for more than 10 years. And I really started paying attention to Google local services ads in around 2017 when it really started rolling out in home service categories. So at that point, it was coming out just in certain cities in the United States and just kind of randomly popping up. And I work with a lot of home service companies. So it was something I knew I needed to pay attention to. And that's kind of where it started with me for at the time it was called home services ads and now local services ads, and just have been watching it grow and expand to all these different verticals and markets over the past few years.
Yeah, and the fun part is GMB just got changed into GBP. So I wonder if local service ads is going to have a name change next year. What do you?
Yeah, hopefully not another one of those. I think they've got it general enough now. I think when it was home services ads, I think they changed it for a couple of reasons, but a big part of it was to be able to expand beyond kind of the default start, which was like kind of the HVAC, plumbing, and locksmith, electrician.
Yep, totally.
But yeah, and don't need a new name change at this point.
And what's the name of your company, Tom? Just for everybody who doesn't know you.
Yeah, the company I'm with is called Wache, and we work with a variety of businesses, but our main focus is in the home services area.
Awesome, cool. Navah, you're up. Where are you from, and what do you do?
I am in Rhode Island. We are having a surprisingly warm day for New England. For those of you that know the Rhode Island area, I work out of Adzuma. We help SMBs and agencies who serve them manage their Google, their Microsoft, their Facebook. And LSAs are near and dear to my heart because I've always seen them as Google's attempt to do good by the little guy. Local service ads really have helped folks that maybe couldn't get access to the amazing opportunities of transactional paid search because the average cost per clicks were just too high. Local service ads really revolutionized and democratized those search result pages. So I'm a big fan. That said, I'm very excited for the conversation today as we explore what's on the horizon, what might be changing as Google rolls up certain products, as we see the landscape in general change in regards to local. So excited to share my also over 10 years coming up on 15 as both a practitioner, SaaS agency. I'm excited to share my perspective on this.
Awesome. Thank you for coming, Navah. And Matt, finally, tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and what do you do?
Sure. So, yeah, of course, my name is Matt Casady. I work for Sterling Sky. We are basically a local SEO agency. So we do obviously local SEO audits. We do local optimization and also Google Ads and LSAs. So I personally have been in this space just a little less than 10 years, but I have worked for a variety of agencies and then also worked in-house at a couple different roles as well. So kind of seeing the in-house marketing departments of small businesses as well, and kind of see how that works. So, but yeah, I'm excited also to talk about LSAs as a product and just kind of see what everyone thinks as far as predictions for the upcoming year or two as well. So I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks everybody for coming. And everybody who you don't know me, my name is Ben Fisher. I'm the founder of Steady Demand. We're also a local SEO agency. We focus on Google business profiles, formerly Google My Business. And we also do local service ads. And I've got to admit, I completely agree with like what you were saying, Nava. I mean, as far as it's kind of the democratization of ads, right? Pay per click, I mean, also, as we know, is very expensive. You're getting charged per click. Whereas when it comes to the little guy, what do we care? What do they care about, right? They care about leads, right? Give them a lead, let them close it. And, I think we've all seen probably anywhere between 40 to 60% usually is conversion rate when you have connects. So it can really change a business and change the lives of a lot of people versus what with pay-per-click, which has been seen as a good way to spend money. And not convert. So with that, I think what I'd like to start out with is a really simple question before we dig into some of this deeper stuff. And that is within the entire Google ecosystem, where does LSA for you fit? And what makes it special? Is it still special? And Nava, I believe that was your question. So why don't we go ahead and start with you?
Excellent. So I don't have to just go ring it. So in terms of local service ads, one of the things I was expecting to happen, which didn't happen, which I'm very excited about, is that local service ads will be rolled up into something called Performance Max. This is a campaign type that Google rolled out this year, full within breadth, which rolls up paid search, YouTube, display, the Discover campaigns, all of it. And the reason why I was expecting local service ads to be rolled up into that Performance Max campaign type is it seemed like there was kind of get everything under smart campaigns, move it all over there. Why I'm excited that it's not is that at the end of the day, Performance Max is still bound by the same rules of paid search in general. So when we think about conversion tracking being accurate or not and having that technical limitation, you still have to make sure that that's correct. Local service ads, by the nature of the product, does not require that. The conversion tracking is built into the ad platform itself. The next thing that I'm very excited about in terms of it being kept separate is the call tracking component. As we look at privacy and the privacy first web and how that all plays out, and I'm sure we will have a conversation about privacy. Local service ads does a really good job of maintaining the privacy component for the advertiser and the end user. And there's also a lot of safety checks put in place. Whereas on the paid search side, YouTube side, like there's a whole number of questions around cookies and all that. And it's kind of nice that it's kept separate so that it can be kept simple for the end user. So that's my 2 cents. And I'm sure we'll have a more robust conversation on all those components, but I want to make sure there's other pieces to tackle for other folks.
Right on. No, that's fantastic overview. Thank you. Matt, what about you?
I think one thing that I find a lot of our clients like an aspect of LSAs that they really enjoy is obviously with traditional Google ads, you're paying for that click whether they do anything or not. I mean, you could have 100 people click on your website and nobody gives you a call and you're still paying for those clicks. There's no way to get a refund for those. But I think that's a piece of LSAs that our clients really like is that, if they're getting irrelevant leads or people that are just not related to their business at all calling them through LSAs, they can get a credit for those. And it's not very often that you get an ads platform where you can get, you can actually dispute leads and get refunds for irrelevant ones. So I think that element of it makes it a really powerful tool for our clients. Also kind of what like Nava was saying, just how accessible it is. There is still some steps obviously to get set up within the LSA portal, but it's almost easy enough that most clients can do it on their own. Certainly we help clients get set up on there. There is some steps that need to be done, of course, but it's generally a much more approachable and accessible product versus signing into Google Ads and seeing 1 million buttons and just being overwhelmed immediately. So,
Yeah, definitely.
yeah.
And I hear you, man. I mean, I agree. I mean, when it comes to the ease of getting onboarded now, like for instance with lawyers, it used to be a little bit tougher to get on board because you had to do the background check and everything like that. And now they just verify the license, the bar license, and the owner, and bang, you have yourself a personal injury LSA account. And I think we're going to touch on this a little bit later, but you're bringing up disputes, and I totally agree. It's a beautiful part of the program. I'm actually kind of surprised that Google allows it and does that, because would think it'd be abused a lot. But there's a great myth that I keep on hearing, and I just want to kill. And that is where we'll be talking to somebody about LSA, and they're like, well, if you dispute leads, isn't that going to hurt your ranking? Look, it's not going to hurt your ranking at all. So just putting that out there.
One quick comment on Google. So there is still something called Invalid Clicks, and you actually do get a credit for Invalid Clicks. It's the percentage of invalid clicks when you have to pay up front and then deal with that downside. So another reason why local service ads are so powerful is that, again, you get that dispute, you get that refund, as opposed to a future credit for advertising. And in the invalid credit piece, there are some accounts where you will get hammered. So they do carry it over, just not to nearly the same extent as with local service ads. So just want to make sure that we're being as fair as possible to Google.
Do we need to put a yet caveat in there?
I don't know.
And so, Tom, many people that are watching might not know this, but you're kind of the OG when it comes to local service ads, right? You really you dug in, you monitored everything that was going on, and you really kept your finger on the pulse of LSA for a couple of years there, actually. So I think the way you might look at this might be a little bit more interesting. Let's find out, though. So the Google ecosystem, where do you think LSA fits? What do you think makes it special? And do you still think it's special?
Yeah, it's definitely an important part. And yeah, I got into it because when it first came out, it impacted our clients, or it was going to be soon. And I really couldn't find much information out about it, as I was just trying to get more and learn as much as I could, because I knew this was going to have a significant impact in our clients and potentially in our business as well. We do pay-per-click and SEO, so it's affecting everything. So all around, it was important to me to try to figure out what's going on with this. There wasn't a whole lot Google was saying about it, and cities, it would launch in a city without any announcement. So I was constantly watching cities, particularly where we had clients, to see when can we sign up, when is this rolling out. So that's where I really started getting involved with it. But what makes it special is the ease of it. I think in a way it's probably a little bit what Google was hoping for years ago when they first started rolling out, the concept of AdWords and Google Ads now just being easy for someone to use. You probably heard a lot of people say they've had bad experience with Google Ads because if it's a small business, they're trying it themselves. They don't know what they're doing. They're wasting money targeting things that, they just don't know what they're doing. You can run a very efficient campaign, and pay-per-click is still a very good source of leads, but it takes a lot more knowledge to do it, right? So a lot of people that have been burned by that feel like it's a bad product because they just had a bad experience with it themselves. And with Google Local Services ads, there's not that much that you have the control of. You're not able to pick what keywords you want to target or not target. Google's doing all of that for you. So for the smaller companies that are trying to do this themselves, they're able to get involved with it. And then also, I'm sure a lot of smaller companies feel like they're going to be overwhelmed or outbid by companies in Google Ads, saying, well, there's no way they're going to be able to compete. So this gives them a chance to at least get up and be able to compete with some of what they might feel the larger businesses in their market are. So that's definitely a huge advantage of it. But it is a piece of the puzzle, and from my perspective, it hasn't taken over. Of course, it's going to vary from one business to another, right? Some businesses might be able to get all the leads they need from local services and organic, and others it could be just one of the areas where they're getting leads, among others with just depending on their lead flow capacity and all of that in mind.
Right. And I agree. I mean, it's a lot of companies that I talk to, I'll say about when they first start talking, they're like, well, aren't the big guys just going to basically kill me? They're going to bid more. They're just going to rank better. And that's all there is to it. And, I usually tell them, I say, look, not necessarily so. These guys are they might not be in the dashboard, for instance, number one. They might not be moving things around. They might not be taking the proper steps. Really, when it comes to ranking, yeah, they might have a bigger budget. But the fact is that there are so many leads that have to go around, and Google does have to kind of, as Jeanette was saying, democratize the process. So, I think I completely agree. So thanks, Tom, for all of your insight there. And, with that, I mean, I think that we should probably just start taking a look at, kind of the things that are happening inside of local service ads, some new things that are happening. By the end of the show, I think we still want to answer that question. Is it still special? So why don't we start off with that? Let's start off with new stuff. I'll just start really quickly. I think one of the things that I have found over the past couple months that has been extremely useful is the ability to finally add permissions from within inside of the local service ads dashboard, and just to be able to email or add an email address, basically, if somebody you want to invite as a new admin or as a manager. And it still kind of looks like the AdWords interface. It does kind of get a little bit funky, I think, when you are dealing with an MCC, which is basically where an agency can manage multiple profiles. But overall, it's just a great new feature. It used to be a lot more difficult. You had to go into AdWords and actually request access. We'll start with you, Tom. What are some of the new things that you've seen in LSA that are exciting to you?
Well, something it's not really that new anymore, and for some people, it probably was never new, since it may have started this way when they were able to get in it. But the bid mode is a big change. So for the home services categories for a few years, it was just a flat rate. So everyone was paying the same price for a lead, and it didn't matter, anything. There was no bidding, so it was just, here's the price you're going to pay for the lead. So it just came down to how many leads could you get. And now when they added bid mode, that certainly changed things, as it allowed a lot more flexibility and control on the business side, but also a little scary because you knew exactly what the lead cost was, and the lead costs were really good, and they have gone up from what I've seen. Still good lead costs, but I mean, I've seen increases in the 50 to 60% range from when they were at their flat rate.
Yeah.
And this is going to vary, of course, by there's so many categories now, right? And so many markets that you're going to have variations, but that's roughly what I've seen. So like a $24-$25 cost per lead now going like $38-$40 kind of typically, but still varying somewhat around that range.
Yeah. And all I can say is poor plumbers. I don't know about you, but that's probably in the service categories. Those guys, they just can't get leads no matter how much they want to pay sometimes. And I agree that, as it's not horrible now, but as we kind of move forward, and I think next year we're going to see this a lot, is that it's just going to be the competition. There's a lot more competition. So it's going to be harder to get leads and it's going to cost more. I still think it's going to be an extremely viable platform and very good for most merchants, but it's going to get more competitive. Matt, over to you. What do you think? What have you seen that's new that's gotten you excited?
I'll say this part gets me excited, but also kind of comes with a warning, or it makes me nervous at the same time. You alluded to this earlier, Ben, but just with a recent change back in October, where lawyers are no longer required to complete the background check, and real estate agents in about 30 of the 50 states don't need the background check either, obviously, as long as they have an active license. This is exciting because I can kind of see Google saying, hey, they're already vetted. We don't need to do an additional background check to get them approved for the platform. So it's exciting from a client standpoint. Certainly, it's easier to set the accounts up for them and faster. the warning, or the part that makes me nervous, is the open door this kind of gives for spamming. I don't know if we're going to get to that at some point, but definitely have seen, despite it being against Google's terms of service, you see a lot of duplicate businesses targeting the same vertical in the same city. So I think, if anything, this makes it easier for people to do that, unfortunately. So yeah, it definitely makes the platform more accessible and faster to access. I'm also just intrigued to see, like back in July when Google changed the maximum bid, when all of a sudden you could bid 10,000, 15,000. I mean, just insane numbers for the verticals, for different verticals. I mean, I don't know what you guys think about it, but for me, it was like, hey, Google's just seeing what people are willing to bid. Like, what are they willing to? What is the lead worth to them? So obviously now it's capped at $1,000 per lead, but I'm just curious to see changes like that and see what Google is thinking in terms of allowing businesses to just max out their bid. So,
did you actually have a client who was maxing their bid out at $10,000 a lead?
I didn't. I think we got maybe a $5,000 lead, but no one was brave enough to go all the way to the top.
God,
$20,000 for one phone call. That better be a good call.
Yeah, no, right, exactly. It better convert, and it better have a darn good payout. I mean, I still think it's interesting when I see people who have $10,000 a week in their weekly budgets, which almost never gets taken advantage of, except for, well, I've seen one instance where they didn't have a great Service Titan integration, and they spent the entire $10,000 in one day, actually. Yeah, they couldn't service those leads. So what about you, Navah? Last but not least.
So seconding all of what's just been said, I guess what I will go with is actually the increase in transparency of rules of engagement. From when LSAs came out to now, I would say documentation is a lot more forthcoming. And I think the teams themselves are a lot more informed. I know that there were times when I would call up Google and I knew more about local service ads mechanics than the person I would be speaking to help a client get set up. And I think we're now at a point where Google is taking local service ads seriously enough as part of its core offering that it's actually making sure that documentation is correct, that the teams know what they're doing. And so what I think that means moving forward is we can probably expect certifications coming. We can maybe start to expect enhancements on the Premier Partnership piece of it, because local service ads has always kind of been like a separate stepchild. And so I think that an increase in knowledge transparency probably speaks in a good way to being brought into the fold. Again, I'm a little bit nervous about it being rolled up fully into that Performance Max kind of thing. But again, Ginny Marvin, ad liaison for Google, has confirmed that that's not happening. But I do think that speaks to good news for all of us, whether we're the agencies helping folks set it up, whether we're the end brand setting it up. More documentation is good. The teams helping us get it set up, knowing what they're talking about is good. So that's what I'll say.
I mean, yeah, I completely agree with you, 1,000% on tap. I mean, the team over at LSA is just, they're amazing, actually. They really are. They're amazing. They're patient. They will answer your questions all day long. You could actually I've had one on the line for like over an hour, just like sitting there, just BSing about LSA. And kudos to them on the documentation front as well. If in most businesses, if your license, say, is expired or is expiring, right, they're going to turn you off basically until you do it, until you get them a new one. And the nice thing with GLSA is that, I mean, hey, if your license is expired, they do give you a leeway to get it updated, and they're still going to show your ads. And it makes sense too, right? But absolutely. So we're going to take a break really quick and we're going to answer some questions. Okay, first one we have here is we've got one from Kathleen Rhodes. Hi, Kathleen. Do you know why house painters, commercial painters aren't included as a category? That's a great question, actually. Tom, any insight from you on that one?
No, I feel like there was, I feel like painters were involved at some point. Maybe it was the Google Voice one. But yeah, I don't have any insight as to what categories they choose or don't choose. Sometimes it's a little puzzling why they will go with one or not another. But so we don't have the metrics or what exactly they're looking at when they decide which ones they're gonna target or not. But it's certainly understandable why you'd want to know that, since there are many that this home service related categories that are in it, and painters are not at this point anyway.
Yeah, I don't know. It's kind of interesting, the rhyme or reason that they have, like who's going to be getting in as a category or not. But I would assume that painters would hopefully be coming down the line. And as a matter of fact, I'm just going to make a note on that to talk to somebody over at LSA about that, because I think that would be a great thing to add painters. Cool. Thank you, Kathleen. Anybody else? Matt, Navah, do you have any thoughts on that? No?
My only thought is, knowing how much of Google is known for their geekery, I have to imagine that they're just rolling a D20 and there's a category associated with each number. Whatever number comes up next is the vertical that they add. On a serious note, though, a big part of it is looking at the number of practitioners in the area and their ability to support and verify those. So like the wait time for lawyers to join LSAs was a really long time, years in the making, before it came out of beta. And then the pandemic hit and Google's ad revenue went down, and magically lawyers were able to use LSAs. So I'm not saying that the two are necessarily tied, but there is a certain degree of pragmatism that goes into it. So it might be they're looking at the paid search side and just not seeing enough volume to justify rolling it out as a vertical on its own, as opposed to being lumped into other services. There's a number of things that can go into that.
And I do believe about 3 years ago, they actually did test house painters in some California markets. So they, from their testing back then, maybe they determined, at least at that point, that they, for whatever reason, it wasn't worth pursuing. Doesn't mean that it won't happen again, because I think they've kind of flip-flop on some of those before. So I wouldn't say that it's not going to happen, but there was probably some data from that determined that they weren't going to push that one for the time being. But yeah, could change. Just going to have to keep an eye out for it.
Yeah, I mean, well, we know that when we were working on the Google Business Profile side of things, God, I hate saying that. Anyway, but on that side of things, I mean, they're always looking at the trends. What's the search traffic basically on certain types of categories, and seeing, I mean, and just looking for how much demand really there is. And it just makes sense. Maybe there just isn't a lot of demand for painters. Sorry, painters. But like you said, they can always change. And so basically, before we just kind of get moving on with home and local services, hey, has a question here. Has quite a few questions, but we'll start with one. So Tom, we'll probably start with you on this one again. Have you noticed that maximize leads versus max per lead platforms are better for home services? Me, I say max per lead. What do you got, Tom?
Yeah, I mean, it does. It can vary. So you definitely need to test it and give it some time on both sides. So if you're doing some testing and you switch to maximize leads, you do need to give it some time. You can't switch it and then a few days later go, okay, this didn't do anything, or it's gotten worse. You really do need to give it long periods of time, from a few weeks to a month at least, and see what those are. I don't think there will necessarily be one across the board. So it does involve some testing there. Matt, I think you've done some testing with this, haven't you?
I have. I wouldn't say necessarily I found one works better for specifically home service ads, but um, I I'd say it really just depends on the market. I know that's kind of a it depends answer, but it does. I mean, if you know, if a client's got $1,000 a week budget and they're hitting that budget every week, I'm not going to change it. So, but
I'll agree
if
on
they're not
that.
getting any leads, like definitely that's going to be one of the first things I test is changing that and maxing out the bid. So, yeah.
Cool. Navah, what do you got? What do you think?
On the bidding, it's
Yeah.
following the same pattern as general Google ads. I mean, when you think about any of the smart biddings, when you think about the migration that they're doing with data-driven attribution versus last click, like there's a shift to trust falling into that smart bidding and giving it that time. The learning period for non-local service ads is 5 days, although when I recommend to clients, it's typically closer to 7 to 14 days, depending on the data thresholds that you hit. I think if you can give whatever you're looking to give or whatever you're looking to do a month, see how it performs, and then make that the verdict for the quarter, that's a good way to operate. Making micro changes is the surest way to underspend your budget. So just like if you make a whole bunch of changes, you'll kill your learning period. You won't spend the budget on the general Google side. So too, it will apply on local service ads. That said, I typically err on the side of big budget initially to ramp it up and then pull that back. I will be interested to see how that strategy works as we move more and more to the smart bidding piece. But again, if you are struggling to get the performance, take it back on manual and set your manual bids, because the best way to ensure that you spend the budget is to force the budget to be spent. It's just you then can't cry if you overspend.
Yeah, I agree with that for sure, especially if you're a smaller business that's getting into this and you're a little concerned, I don't want to spend too much. So you might come in with that weekly budget really low because you're thinking, well, I don't want to spend, $500 a week or whatever. Yeah, agree. Set the budget high and keep an eye on it. If it starts getting away from you, then dial it back. But more than likely, you're not going to burn through that budget. So, and if you're starting out on this, you want to keep a close eye on it anyway. So yes, start with the budget high. If you're getting a bunch of leads from it, great. Hopefully you can turn those into business. If you're getting too many or spending too fast, dial it back down.
I completely agree. I had one client that came to us and they were like, well, we only want one lead. So we want to set our budget at 75 and our max per lead at 75. Obviously, it didn't go very well for them in the beginning. So, and just one thing I want to throw out there, a little golden nugget, I guess, and that is kind of what you were talking about there, Tom, and also a little bit on that on your side, Navah, and that is that I have it on high from somebody over at LSA that when you do change your bidding strategy, it takes 2 weeks actually to settle into that new bidding strategy. So, so that's just a little piece of info out there for you. Well, cool. So let's touch really quickly on why not? Let's have fun. Let's talk on myth. Let's talk about myths really quick. So does everybody have one myth that they would like to kill about local service ads, whether it be about ranking or just how it works or whatever you've heard, where you constantly say, "Yeah, no, sorry, that's a myth." And Matt, we haven't picked on you enough, so we're going to start with you.
Oh, don't start with me. I'm still thinking.
All right.
That means that the one that you come up with will be the best one because it's your knee-jerk reaction.
Sure.
Right. Okay. All right, Navah, you're up.
Fine. I'm actually going to use the one that from our conversation at PubCon. Of which reviews matter the most, the ones that you get through your local service ads or the one that you get through your Google business profile. Now, the correct answer is they are weighted the same. They truly don't matter. However, I would say that the ones that you get through your Google business profile are the more ideal ones to focus on. Like you don't need to stress about getting them through your local service ads, because if your local service ads ever go away, those reviews go away, you also can't really interact with them. Whereas the ones on your Google Business profile, you can. So the myth can be the ones that come through your local service ads maybe matter more, or the ones through your Google Business profile matter more. They matter the exact same. They weight the exact same towards maintaining that 3.0. The thing to bear in mind is that if you ever stop advertising, those reviews go away.
Exactly. And the only other thing that I'll add to that is, I remember that conversation. That was fun. But the only thing I'll add to that is that having verified reviews from local service ads, the only other reason that why they'd be important is if you see the competitors in your area have more than you, then you probably want to dial it up just a little bit so you can get even or exceed them by a small percentage, because they are a conversion factor in that case. But from a ranking factor, totally agree. Don't even matter. Tom, Matt, you guys agree or do you disagree?
Yeah, that's a great one. That's a huge one. The only thing, and I completely agree. The only thing I would say with where you can maybe improve somewhere would be if you're looking at a profile. I know this is for sure on like the home service category. So if you're looking at if you click into the local services ad to look at the profile of that business, the reviews that the business obtained through local services will be at the top of that list. So, and I think there's only like 3 visible. So that's really the only thing where, like, I would say, look at your profile, and you might have a 4.8, 4.9 rating. If you go to that profile, maybe you have just a handful of LSA sourced reviews and you got 1 or 2 bad ones, then those could be at the top of that list, even though you may have had hundreds of great reviews since then. And also the date will show on there. So it could look like it could come across as your most recent review is from 2 years ago and it was a bad review. So I'd say it's worth looking at your profile, what reviews are visible there. If you got a bad one, it's likely a local services one, unless you just never got any. And so you might want to think about getting some newer ones just to at least push, fill that little area. So that would be the only thing I would say on that.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Tom. And we know that with like Google My Business or just getting reviews in general, that a lot of consumers, they want to see freshness in reviews, right? So what we at least do with our clients is we actually put up a ratio, basically. So if you're going to get X over on GMB, you want to get Y on LSA. And so that way it's kind of rotating. And so in any given week, you're going to have at least 1 new one in GMB, and you're going to at least have 1 new one in GLSA. So that's a fantastic point. What about you, Matt? What do you think about the review?
Yeah, I definitely agree. It's important to get verified reviews. I think it was implied, but on mobile, obviously they're highlighted with like the little orange tag next to it. So that definitely makes them stand out. I will mention this real quick. I'm curious, Navah, if you've seen the reviews get deleted before. The only reason I mentioned that is I know in Google's documentation it mentions basically if they won't be deleted, that the reviews on the platform won't be deleted if the provider leaves, like if they stop doing the LSA ads. So I'm curious if you've seen counter of that, if you have seen them actually get deleted. And this kind of goes maybe more into the predictions side of things, but I am curious to see if next year we start seeing the Google Business Profile start showing the actual LSA reviews within the platform. So it's more of a
full disclosure. I have not seen the reviews actually be deleted, but it comes from the documentation of them saying, and I'll find the area where it was documented and linked to that. Where they actually will remove the reviews. So they might not be, like, they might be stored. And when you start advertising again, they'll come back. It's just that while you stop advertising, and that went back with the sponsored, when it was Google My Business, that sponsored profile, where you might pay $50 a month just to have it. And that's around from when they were testing that piece. So, this is also goes back to that earlier statement of Google being better about documentation. Google is definitely being a little bit better on that transparency front. But yeah, the documentation is you stop advertising, the reviews get hidden. You start advertising again, they come back. So it's not that they're removed entirely; they just are no longer going to be visible on your profile.
Makes sense. Cool. Matt, are you ready with your myth yet? No.
No, I don't have a myth in mind. I have other like tactics and stuff, but
we'll get into that next. We get into that next. So, okay, Tom, any myths that annoy you that you would like to squash?
I'm sure there's some. I can't. The review one's a great one. That's definitely one that I'd have at the top of the list. I can't think of any others right now.
Okay. All right. Well, cool. Let's get into some really interesting tactics, and then we'll touch on next year. And actually, I want to bring up a question from Joel Snyder before we run into tactics. And that is Joel's asking, can you run 2 bid strategies at the same time to compare results? I'm just going to go ahead and throw it over to Matt. Go for it. Why not, Matt?
On the same account, no. But you could set up, like if you're doing a different vertical in a different market or same vertical in a different market, you could do that. So if you have 2 locations, one is in just a town in Ohio and the other is another town in Ohio, you could test both of those strategies, because then you could be the same vertical but 2 different locations. That'd be fine to test. Or let's say, for example, you're servicing the same city, but for one, you want to set the bid for criminal law and the other is for DUI law. As long as they don't have the same verticals on the same account, you could set up 2 different accounts for the same location and then test the different strategies with those. So you could do it that way if you wanted. But as far as I'm aware, you're not technically allowed to do same location, same vertical, targeting the same market with 2 different bid strategies.
Yeah, it's a great way to get yourself kicked out of LSA, actually. But Navah, Tom, do you have any comments on the question?
What was the question? Sorry, I was digging up that documentation.
It's basically, can you A/B test at the same time with your bidding strategies? Is really what
I
it comes down
wouldn't,
to.
because you're applying that to the profile. So unless you have 2 different profiles for 2 different locations, I think that's actually really risky. So if you wanted to test for the different locations, 100% be empowered to test one location with one, another location with another. But other than that, I would not wreak havoc on a profile this split test like that.
Cool. Tom, any last thoughts before we move on?
Yeah, nothing else to add.
All right, cool. So with that, we've got about 15 minutes left. So now we're just going to kind of run straight along, and we're going to talk a little bit about, I would like each of you to share one of your golden nuggets about what can help me rank in local service ads. And then we are going to move on to just whatever kind of predictions we have for next year. So with that, I'm going to start with Tom. What do you think? What's one golden nugget that you'd like to share?
Well, yeah, something we touched on earlier is don't come in with too low of a budget, because that's one thing where you can really hurt yourself without realizing. So if you're coming in with that really low budget, you're just increasing the chances that Google's going to not show you. So you're going to have that you're putting a limitation on yourself in order to try to, not overspend. So, and that should be an obvious one, but I think with a lot of people, it's not, because they're coming in and we're very concerned about overspending or spending more than they would want to.
No, that's a great tip. Fantastic. Matt, over to you. What's your golden nugget about ranking?
I say this is more of a general tactic for LSAs rather than specifically for ranking, but I'd say if you're in a super competitive market, personal injury lawyers comes to mind. If there's a related vertical that could still be relevant to your business, I recommend adding those or setting up a separate account to add those. So there is because if you look at a category, for example, disability lawyer, specifically for workers' comp, there's going to be significantly less competition for that vertical. If you're doing medical mal, I know that's a needle in a haystack for lawyers trying to get a good lead out of that. Your cost per lead and the competition for that vertical is going to be significantly less than if you're just doing personal injury. So I do recommend clients test that. Sometimes, it's hit or miss. You do have to dispute a lot. You have to monitor those closely and see if they're worth keeping on the account or keeping those accounts going. But there is overlap on a lot of the verticals. So even with the home services, you can find some verticals that are similar enough that it may be worth adding multiple verticals or doing a different account to test that different vertical and see if you get decent leads from it. But again, I recommend monitoring that closely and making sure you are disputing those leads if you're getting irrelevant ones from that extra vertical.
That's a great one. Thank you. Awesome. What about you, Navah? What's your gold tip for local service ads?
Just be mindful about what you're targeting. I think the long and short of why folks fail with local service ads is that they try to service all of their markets, all of their services in a single profile. Be empowered to set separate profiles for each of the different areas of your business, each of your different markets, so that you can allocate budget, but also not cannibalize one location to feed another. So long as you have a profile per major market, and again, the general service area, you will be in great shape. So yeah, that's my one major tip.
Okay, cool. And I'll just throw out one there that we've seen that's been very effective. This is not an encouragement for spamming, but that is that if you really want to get a little bit of an edge over your competition, is you can actually contact GLSA and have them go ahead and change your business name. This is really handy, by the way, when you're working with a multi-location business, because you can actually, just like, for instance, have the name of the city appended to your name. It's going to help you, from the ranking conversion standpoint, but also it's going to make things a lot easier when you're looking inside of your MCC dashboard to see which profile is which. Well, cool. With that, let's see. I'm just trying to see if there's any questions here really quick. Is there a category for fine artists? Yeah, no, unfortunately, I'm sorry, Louis, there is not a category for fine artists. And let's see. Not sure if that's a question, so I'll bring it up. Raphael, if you look at keywords, you will see some firms with 10 LSA all overlapping in the entire state. Oh, yeah, I know what you're talking about, Raph. Yeah, so this is basically talking more about how some users are spamming Google local service ads, and they're able to actually get multiple profiles showing up in the same practice area as well as in the same city state. Question for the panel then, and that is that what do you see when you're looking at this, and how do you combat it, or do you combat it?
Yeah, I mean, on the home services side, I brought this up for years to product managers at LSA, and there are certain companies that certainly get away with it more than others, like National Change, where they, people say, oh, they're different franchises. No, they're not. They're flooding it, and they're able to overlap and get away with it. And it's definitely frustrating. And I don't work really on the lawyer side, but I've seen that too, where it's, when people go back and say, oh, LSA started because of abuse in Google My Business, it's like, well, there's some fundamental things that they didn't address that, were being abused in maps. And they seem to be oblivious to that. And that is the multiple locations, and you're not supposed to target the same specific, same areas with multiple local services ads, but clearly it happens, just like they're stating there, and Google's really not doing a good job at policing that.
Yeah. And unfortunately, you can't tell, for instance, if it's, say, a PI lawyer and they're using a virtual office, right, a Regis or a co-working space or something like that, or somebody's home even, um, because the address and everything is hidden, you're not able to really tell this information. So it's harder to report. But Matt, what about you? How do you deal with a situation like this?
I'd say for starters, at least like currently the documentation backs up the fact that that's not supposed to be allowed. So like, at least you have that on your side. I mean, technically it's not allowed. I have recommended in the past, it is something that you can report. You can contact LSA support and report these profiles. So if you go in and contact them as a consumer, I would caution that you probably don't use an email associated with your business or your account. It is kind of a gray area, if you will. It's kind of risky in some ways. So, but it is possible to report them and to just let LSA support know about that. I haven't always seen them take action, but it is technically not allowed, and it's something you can report them for doing.
I almost have to wonder if a call asking where their actual location is actually at would be something that they would utilize to kind of support that kind of report. Navah, what about you? How would you deal with that?
I 100% support Matt's suggestion about reporting fraud if you suspect fraud. The other thing just to remember is that if someone has paid for a satellite office, the $400, $500, $800 a month to claim that listing and it's valid, and they name it something that's very keyword centric, which is beginning to happen, they might actually have that is how people throw money at the problem intelligently. So there's a difference between smart money and dumb money. If you are consistently running against this and they've followed the letter of the law when it comes to Google, I would actually look at tangential zip codes. There's kind of an unofficial 35 vendors per market where it can be a little bit difficult to serve if there are more than 35 per market. So if you look for markets that are related to yours, they're close, it's within that proximity ranking, that could be a way to get around it if you know that the vendor has actually claimed that Google My Business listing correctly. But if, as Matt said, if it's clearly fraud, be empowered to report it. Local service ads takes fraud cases a lot more seriously than traditional Google does, and they take it very seriously. So be empowered to inquire, but just bear in mind that there is actually a valid way that they could have done it. And it typically is throwing intelligent money at the problem.
Yep, I completely agree. I mean, we do it with our clients every single week. We report. If we feel there's an issue, let Google sort it out. Basically, at the end of the day, is really what it comes down to. It's kind of like with disputing. You're not guaranteed to win, but when you do, it's good. So let's see. Raphael has one more question here. So we notice metropolitan areas like PI, like New York City and Chicago, the map pack is a mess with GMB. Is there a glitch or some new reality? Oh, sorry, we're not really talking about GMB right now, but so lastly, I mean, we've got 7 minutes left here, so let's just go really quickly and go around the room here. And what do you think is going to be exciting for next year? And I guess more importantly, do you think that there's any industries where the ship has kind of sailed for local service ads right next year? And Navah, we'll go ahead. We'll get started with you.
So it's not so much industries, but actual locations. I think the ship has sailed not simply because it's crowded. So you want to be mindful if you're in a congested area, complicated area. Can you go after maybe your tier B, tier C markets, or some zip codes that are just outside of that DMA that you're looking to go to? I don't think any vertical is really the ship has sailed. Every vertical has some degree of promise. It's more the actual physical locations. So you want to get on it as quickly as you can because you want to be able to lock in your spot and begin building that ranking. In terms of things on the horizon, again, that privacy piece and how much the local service ad product is contained, I would expect that to be a safe haven, as pretty much every other ad channel is getting hit with these policy pieces. So I would 100%, if it's something that could serve your business, factor that in. And if you already are, be prepared to just relax and enjoy the ride as everyone else is screaming around you with the privacy piece. Because again, the fact that local service ads is so contained from a conversion tracking standpoint, from a privacy standpoint, you're in a good spot.
Cool. Tom, over to you. What do you think? 2022, what do you think's coming?
More categories. When they launched attorneys, and they came in just full throttle, and it was maybe a little much. And then with COVID, they kind of backed off the just massive expansion. I think it had been pretty stagnant for a while, but there are actually a lot more categories being added currently. So you're going to see a lot more. They're going to see a lot more variation too, outside of the typical categories from what we've seen either in professional services, which is the Google screen, like the attorneys and real estate, and then the home services, which is a Google guaranteed. But you're going to start seeing things like dance instructors, yoga studios, preschools. There's all these things that they're now starting to put out there. So
Yeah, animal shelter.
Yeah, so I think after
Right.
this long pause, I think they're going to start stepping it back up. So as Navah said, you've got when a market gets saturated, it can be pretty tough. So getting in early on these is important. So it's something you want to keep an eye on, and because maybe you feel like this doesn't impact your business now, but there's a good chance that it could in the future. And if it does, you want to be ready for it and be in there as soon as possible to take advantage of it.
I completely agree. And Matt, what about you? 2022.
Yeah, so these are more general product predictions, but kind of along Tom's line of how these have become more important. The documentation for local service ads already supports LSAs being mentioned when you do voice searches. So I've done some testing, on like my Google Home and Google Assistant, and I'm currently, at least in my market, not seeing LSA screen businesses listed when I do a voice text, but that's already in the documentation that could be coming. So definitely wouldn't be surprised if that shows up, and then obviously that increases the importance of them. I'd say start. I mentioned this earlier, but I wouldn't be surprised if the local service ad reviews start showing within the Google Business Profile. And then lastly, I hope this is coming at some point. I would love if Google let us set the budget based on location, so that I want to bid more in one market than I do in another, and I don't want to have to set up a separate account to do that. But also a weekly bid per vertical would be fantastic. I would really hope someday LSA introduces that. But
Yeah, I gotta agree, but at the same time, I think I can understand the methodology behind the madness of having to set up these multiple accounts. And I hate to say it, but it comes down to their numbers. More ad accounts, more Gmail accounts, also just more granular control for them, in their spam systems. So, but I agree with you. I really wish that they would give us a lot more control. My big prediction for next year, I think, is their reporting actually is going to get a little bit better. It's a dismal type of report. It really is. We've had to create one ourselves. And Tom, I know you have your own as well too. And I actually, Navah and Matt, have you made your own types of reports for LSA?
yeah.
Yeah. So here you go. 4 marketing companies. We've all made our own different reports. LSA, make a better report, please. Anyway, let's see. With that, thanks for coming, and also thanks to Duda for hosting this webinar in the first place. And we are going to, thank you. That's exactly what we're going to do is we're going to close this out with a question. And that is, and that's not a stupid question, by the way, not at all. But the answer is yes.
Well, somewhat. At first,
technically, yeah.
They did not police this, and there were abusers like connecting all of these to one, but one location. So you might have multiple verticals. So if you have two different LSA accounts, the same business location can connect to that one profile, Google Business Profile.
Very true.
And just one thing on the reviews, the document, it would be nice to see them get combined, but I will say this: documentation says it's going to be coming it's going to happen in the coming months. It has said that for about 3 years, so I'm not holding my breath on that.
It would be nice, but I think it's a good wish. Let's just put it that way.
Sure.
You gotta put those things into the universe. If you don't put it into the universe, they don't happen.
Exactly. Well, we'll be sharing this video with some of the people over at LSA, so hopefully they take it to heart. So, all right. With that, I think we are going to go ahead and close out the year. Matt, Navah, Tom, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate you coming. Have a wonderful, happy end of the year. Be safe, and we will see you all next year. Thanks for coming.
Great talking to you guys. Thanks.